your notes. Are we recording? Hi, good morning, those of you on the video. This is Esther Lesson 1. In case you're trying to figure this out in your car, or, some child is crying in the background, Esther Lesson 1, you're in the right place. You should all have your notes, and then if you have your Esther book, some of you may have gotten these. I love these because they're just beautiful, right? Especially the Esther one. And then your homework books. I don't have mine, but I think y'all have yours. So let's pray. I want to pray for us this morning for this whole study. The verse in Isaiah that asks, who is it that the Lord loves? He loves someone who's humble and contrite and trembles at his word. And that is my prayer for us today, that we will tremble this whole study at his word. So let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for today. It's cold, but it's beautiful outside. Thank you for the sunshine, the birds, that we could all be here. We don't want to take that for granted. And I do pray that we will humbly come before you to hear your word and to learn what you want us to learn. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, let's start with Esther. So this morning I want to back way up for a minute. And before we talk about Esther, I want to talk about how to learn from an Old Testament story, because it's a little different, right? And then we'll talk about the king of Persia. He was quite a person. And that's as far as we'll get today. But we all love fiction stories so much, right? Or at least I do. Do y'all love to read? Yeah, we got a bunch of readers in here. I always have since I was little. I read very early, and to this day, read. I devour anything I can get my hands on. So think back to all those little kid books, Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little, The Secret Garden. Have y'all read The Secret Garden? Did it not change your life, right? Donna, will you do me a huge favor?
Yes.
Will you lower the blinds? There's a glare coming off a car out through that window. It's blinding me. Like I'm seeing spots. But I loved getting lost in a story, right? It was just so encouraging to be whisked away to another place and time, and to root for the good guys and to actually enjoy hating the bad guys. And we know that those kinds of stories really are meant to entertain us, right? They're written for fun, usually. But what about the stories in the Bible? Are they meant to entertain us? No, they might be entertaining, but they certainly have a deeper, bigger purpose than just fun. A great example of stories in the Bible are the parables that we find in the New Testament. And we know that those are usually made up stories that typically teach one spiritual lesson. Jesus used them all the time, right? He probably is who made them famous, I think. But our Old Testament stories have a purpose, a very unique purpose also. They come with their own set of hermeneutic guidelines to help us understand them. So what is hermeneutics? It's just the right way to interpret the Bible, right? Is it an Old Testament law that was written to Israel? Maybe we don't have to follow that law today. Is it New Testament doctrine that is written to us and all the believers in our day? How about Proverbs? We read those a certain way, right? We read Psalms another way. Well, today I want to take a few minutes, real quick, because I'm a nerd like this, right? To look at the guidelines for reading an Old Testament story. They're a little different. I'm trying to maybe add some guardrails. Yeah, if you know me at all, you know I'm not a good bowler. I like the rails that you put up. What do you call those? The bumpers? Judy's good bowling, but I need those little things. to keep me straight down the middle. So that's what we're going to look at just for a minute. So they're kind of ringing in our head as we go through the whole study. What Old Testament stories do we have? What am I talking about? We've got what?
Genesis.
Well, no, don't think books like that. Think like some short stories. We'll keep them short. Yes. We've got Ruth. Good.
David and Goliath.
We've got the story of David and Goliath. Yeah, if you just take that story. We've got Jonah. Story of Jonah, Esther, Job. Job is a great example of using the right interpretive tools so that you don't just read Job and go crazy. Because you have to read all the way to the end of Job to realize, oh, the advice he was getting all along was bad. You don't know that until you get to the very end. So, or some of it was probably good advice, but applied to the wrong person in the wrong situation at the wrong time. So we have to be careful with what we do. We want to do the same thing with Esther, okay? So point 1 here is how to read an Old Testament story. How to read an Old Testament story. And I'm taking this from Christopher Ash's book. I'm pulling heavy from him. I love him. I'm enjoying his book, if you're looking for one. So number 1 there is, it's a story. Your blank there for number 1 is story. It's a story. And what does that mean? Why? I mean, isn't that obvious? But it comes with an introduction, right? It's going to have a setting, characters, a time period, a place, all of those specific things that come with an introduction. So a setting, the characters, who's in it, when was it written, where, what time is it, what time of year is it, what time of day is it, all that good stuff. Where are we? Then it's going to have a complication. What is the problem? There's usually a problem, or there's always a problem. Otherwise, you're just telling facts. There's always a problem. There's a resolution. How's it solved? How is that problem figured out? And then there's usually a conclusion, maybe some loose ends that are tied up, or, she lived happily ever after, or he went on and became this or that, how it is. Christopher Ash says it is sometimes said of stories that the turning point is the teaching point. Once that crisis is resolved, as we read a Bible story, we shall need to ask why and how each part of that tension is resolved. In these ways, the stories draw us in at the level of our emotions as much as our intellect. Stories affect us. I could stand here and say, long time ago, some lady named Esther saved her people. Those are the facts. But is it the same? No, not at all. There's a reason why these stories are told as stories, and it's because that's the best way for us to learn. So for homework this week, Susan said I was going to explain all. Anyway, remind me at the end. But for homework this week, if you haven't read Esther ever, or if it's been a long time, read it. Read it all the way, or listen to it all the way through. And read it completely invested in whether or not Esther and Mordecai make it. Are they going to make it? What happens to the horrible Haman? Are you holding your breath with Esther? Can you feel what she feels when she gets all dressed up and walks in to see the king? Is he gonna kill her? Is he gonna let it? I don't know. Do you feel Mordecai's desperation when he passes those messages back and forth with Esther? Can you just picture the fierceness of him whispering to the messenger, go tell Esther, make sure you say this, do it this. Like, these are real people. They're real stories. Are you mad at Haman? At the end of the story, are you cheering? Should be. He deserved it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go read the story. I don't want to give it away. All right, number 2. So number 1, it's a story. Number 2, it's a true story. It's the truth. This is not fiction. This is not made up to entertain us at the beach, right? This is the truth. We can trust that all the facts are accurate, of course. But more than that, remember, the viewpoint of the storyteller is the perspective of God. I love that. The viewpoint of the story is the perspective of God. So that, of course, is going to carry weight with us. Whoever wrote Esther didn't just want to tell us a cool story, keep us up at night. God wanted us to see and hear and smell and feel the story so that we can learn whatever it is that he wants us to learn. But we can also know that because the story comes from God, we can trust that we are told all he wants and needs us to know. So, number three there, be cautious about only, you might want to circle that word, looking for good examples to follow or bad examples to avoid. So your blanks there are good and bad. Good examples and bad examples to avoid. And here's what that means. There may be plenty of other places in the Bible that help us interpret the morality of people's actions, but if that's not the point of the story, you might miss the point of the story. For example, King Xerxes, King Ahasuerus, he went by both names depending on who was talking to you. He has a violent temper, and he's homicidal. If we only focus on that narrow point and teach all of the biblical reasons why being angry is a sin. Now, is it a sin to be angry? Yeah, of course. And if we teach how to overcome anger in our lives, should we overcome anger in our lives? Yeah, of course, right? But if that's all we're teaching in Esther, then we've missed the bigger point of the whole story, which is about the protection and sovereign providence of God in spite of angry men. So can you think about, anger's wrong? Yes, of course. But just remember there's a bigger picture going on. And then lastly, number 4, we want to remember, so this is for all of the Bible, right? That God and Jesus are the heroes of the Bible stories, not us. Not us. God is the hero of every Bible story, as God is holiness, his faithful love, his wisdom, so on. In this story, we're going to see his providential care over his people. But it's not enough to say that God is the hero, for the big Bible story hinges around Jesus Christ. If God the Father is the unseen hero, Jesus Christ the Son is the human and visible hero. So we are to expect that as we walk today, thousands of years after these stories were written, we are to expect that as we walk in Christ's footsteps, we too will sometimes begin to imitate the heroes in the Bible stories. If you are a Christian, I love this, then the love story in Ruth is your love story. And the rescue in Esther is your rescue. We are right when our instincts drive us to involve ourselves in each story, to feel that this story touches and in some way relates to the stories of our own lives. But we are wrong when we want to cast ourselves into the starring role. That belongs to God. So the line, therefore, is you go from, it's not from Old Testament hero to me. So what we don't want to do is say, oh, I'm going to be like Esther. Okay? What we want to do is go from Old Testament hero to Jesus and then to Christ in me. So as much as Esther or David or whomever, Jonah, or pick your favorite Old Testament hero, heroine, Ruth, as much as they're like Christ and point me to Jesus, then I want to be like them. Okay? So just a small little distinction there. Okay. What page are y'all on? Page 2? Look, I made a chart at the bottom of the page. I'm so proud. Doesn't take much. Okay, so today and next week, I want to take a few minutes to introduce the book of Esther. Just real quick. And then next week, we'll talk about courageous Esther herself. But today, a little bit about the book. It's one of 2 books named after a woman, Ruth and Esther. And you know, back in that day, for these books to have been named after a woman was just something. Women were not very high on, in society back then. So who wrote the book of Esther? We don't know. Mordecai, maybe. There's a pretty good pitch for it being Mordecai. Ezra, maybe. Nehemiah could have written it. They were all contemporaries and afterwards. And then what about the story structure? Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, so we know it's a story. So it has an intro as you're reading. This is kind of rough. I think chapters 1 and 2 give you the intro information, the setting, the scene, what you need to know. Chapter 3 is kind of the problem. There's a problem. Then there's the first kind of solution, chapters 4 through 8. The final solution is 8 and 9, halfway through 9. And then the conclusion is the end of 9. And have you read it? Chapter 10 is super short. It's just a few little verses. It's like the ending. So Esther is a dark story, right? Full of harassment, assassination attempts, a dictator with unrestrained power, a government-planned genocide, drunken policymakers who make up laws, just on a whim. Well, they're drunk, so I'm not sure they're thinking. But it's the darkness of this story, right, that makes the light shine even brighter. The light's always there. The light's always the same. The light doesn't become dim or brighter or darker. Jesus is the same. But sometimes our dark circumstances help us see him a little brighter, right? So this first chapter in Esther, if you want to turn there in your Bible, I think I've printed it out in your notes if you just want to use what's in your notes. But let's go through, let's look at Esther 1. Esther 1. So this is all introductory material to the book, and it's all in here for a reason. We are being given this information by God for a reason. So let's see if we can figure it out. Esther 1:1. Now it happened in the days of Ahasuerus or Xerxes, depending on which translation you've got, This is the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. Okay, so here's this map. I don't know if I can y'all see it? So he was in orange. So the area that he was the king over was massive. There were 50 million people. They're estimating 50 million people living in this Persian empire. And what is astounding about that to me is that this was about 45% of the world's population at that time. That's a lot of people. John just told us Sunday, how many, is it
8.1 billion.
8.1 billion people now. So half of the world's population lived right there back then. And 50 million is roughly the amount of people who live in England today. So I thought that was cool. I was just in England, so I thought that was cool. It is the 3rd year of his reign. That'll come up. We get some good time markers for how long he reigned. But here is, in modern day, this is a rough picture of where he reigned. So we've got Turkey, not Russia. It was probably too cold to live in Russia back then, I would guess. But all the way over, not India, but like from Pakistan all the way over Afghanistan, all of this, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, it went all the way over into Africa. So basically we're looking at like 3 continents here, and you can see right there under the Mediterranean Sea. See Israel? It's pink. It's next to Jordan, which is green, in between the ocean. And that's how tiny Israel is. And they just it had been taken over and everyone carted off into captivity. So it just always, when I see how small Israel is, it just makes me wonder, like, they're so mighty. They're so small, but they're so mighty. So, lot of, let's see if I can go back. There we go. All of that covers a lot of land. They didn't even have, it's just amazing to me. All right, let's look at Anna's very brief history of ancient Persia. And by brief, I mean brief. All right, our first blank, your first blank there, is Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great, he conquered the Medes and the Babylonians. He's the founder of the Persian Empire. He allowed the Jews to return home. He's the one, Cyrus the Great, allowed the Jews to return home. Our Daniel served under Cyrus for a little bit, and he was considered just and noble. He was a good man. He was a good leader. Apparently, at least the historians loved him. Cyrus the Great. So this is about, 500 years before Jesus? Just for some perspective there, okay? So then his son, next, we have Darius the First, the Great. They were all the great. Darius First, the Great. So now we're moving on a little in time. Darius is the one that allowed the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. It had been destroyed. He allowed it to be rebuilt. And what he's famous for, even though you don't know his name, is that he's the one that was defeated in the Battle of Marathon. So, big battle, and remember, the runner went from one place to the next to give the messages, and he ran 26.2 miles, the first marathon. And then what happened to him? Anybody know? He dropped dead. Yeah, yeah. So, but if you've ever run a marathon or know a a great person who has great, like, I've had marathon runners in my life. And then when that's not enough, they'll run the, those, what do they call the marathons that are like, the ultra marathons? Yeah, they're like 50 miles or 100 miles. Yeah, yeah, my son, he's crazy. Okay, so we've got Cyrus, Darius, and then we've got Xerxes, or Ahasuerus. You can write Xerxes, it's smaller, it's a shorter word and easier to spell. So this is our dude. This is Ahasuerus in Esther. And I couldn't think of a way to describe him, so I just say he has violent temper. He's violent. Okay, so this is where we come. And then we skip a little bit to Artaxerxes. And I put him in here. He's on your next page, the top of page 3. So Artaxerxes, I just thought this was cool because of Nehemiah. So Artaxerxes is the one that authorized his cupbearer, our Nehemiah, to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem. And then we're going to skip up to Darius III. We've dropped the great, just Darius III. This is in the early 300s BC. He was the last king of this great Persian empire. He was defeated by Alexander the Great. Persia falls, Alexander the Great captures Babylon, and that just sets the stage for ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and here we are today with laws and democracy, and you can trace it all back to here. All right, did you get all those blanks? That was the entire history of Persia. There we go. Here's a picture of it. Okay, so remember, we want to pay close attention to what the details are telling us, because a good writer chooses his words purposefully, intentionally, to paint the correct picture. So we should be asking ourselves, why was this detail included? So let's look and see what's in here. So on page 3, right here under the chart, we're going to start with verses 2 through 4. We're going to do this super quick. So I want you to go through and, as I'm reading, circle the words that have anything to do with being the king. Okay? In those days, so I'm starting in verse 2. Y'all with me? Okay. In those days, as king, I'd circle that one, or underline it, or smiley face it, whatever you want. King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne. There's a good one. Which was at the citadel. That's a good one. So the citadel wasn't just the capital. It was like the military fortress in the center of business in Susa. In the 3rd year of his reign, it's a good king word, he held a feast for all his princes and servants, the military officers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of his provinces. Like all of this, it all belongs to him. These are his people, his army, his throne. While he displayed the riches of his royal glory, is a good one, and the splendor of his great majesty for many days, 180 days. How long is 180 days? 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. For 6 months. So basically he's like he's opened up this museum to show off all his stuff. And anyone can come see it. All right. So did you get all those words? So if we were going to make an observation just based on those words, what would it be?
Self-exaltation.
It's all his, yeah. It's all about him. Okay? It's all his. He's the king. There is no doubt. All right, second part. Verses. This will be verses 5 through, 7? 5 through 7. So here we're looking for color words. Any color words. And this painting here is some old famous painting. It's an oil painting that is supposed to be this feast. I don't think the colors match, but it's some famous painting. So, verse 5. And when these days were fulfilled, so at the end of 6 months, the king held a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present at the citadel in Susa, from the greatest to the least. So everyone's invited, even the servants. In the court of the garden of the king's palace, there were hangings. So picture this. There were hangings of fine white and blue linen, held by cords of fine purple linen, white, blue, purple, on silver rings, and marble pillars. Marble could be any color, right? And couches of gold and silver. I bet those were comfortable. On a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. And drinks were served in golden vessels of various kinds, meaning each one was uniquely handcrafted. And the royal wine was plentiful. I wonder, the wine, what color was it? Could be white wine, red wine, I don't know what color's wine. And it was plentiful, according to the king's hand. So, anyone know what porphyry is? I had to look it up. So it's this rare, hard purple and red stone. Usually it can be other colors, but that's usually what it is. But it was used when they built the Roman roads and still survives to this day. So they considered it a very precious thing because it was so useful to them. So can you see all the pictures? All the colors? So Ian Duguid says the very ground on which the guests walked and the seats on which they sat were made of things that other hosts would have kept safely locked away as precious treasures. They were just under your feet and under your seat. So, what can we take away from these details? What's a good, based on the facts, on the details? The riches were just unimaginable, right? Has anyone ever been to Hearst Castle in California? Anybody? Yeah, the floors, those mosaics, yeah, that's what this reminds me of. All right, third. We're almost done. I'm hurrying. Well, we gotta hurry. All right, verse 8. Page 4, verse 8. And the drinking was done according to the law. There was no compulsion, for the king had established it for each official of his household, that he should do according to what pleased each person. Okay, so what are we, circle the law here. What's the law? The law is you can drink whatever you want to. Y'all, the implications of the fact that there was a law about how much alcohol you could or couldn't drink shows you how micromanaged every minute of life was. I mean, it was nice of them to say you didn't have to drink if you didn't want to, but still, it was a law. All right, next, let's look at verse 9. Let's look for the royal words. Queen Vashti also held a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. So we've got the royal house, we've got King Ahasuerus here. Okay, so whose house is it? It's the king's. It's not her house, it's his house. All right, Queen Vashti. Verses 10 through 12. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry, he's drunk with wine, he said, for Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who attended to the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring the queen. Bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and the princes, for she was stunning in appearance. Queen Vashti refused to come at the word of the king, which was delivered by the hand of the eunuchs. Then the king became exceedingly furious, and his wrath burned within him. King Ahasuerus is drunk. He calls for his 7 eunuchs. Listing their names is a nice detail to add. It's going to come up later. To bring him the queen in order to show him off to men. So it's an all men's party, right? And she said no. I think this is supposed to shock everyone. And I think we should be whispering. Like, what? She said no. You tell me. I'm not telling you. You tell me. Like, can you imagine having to be the one to say, she's not coming. We tried. We don't know what to do. So why do you think she said no? It's a trap. Don't answer. We're not told the reason why she said no. It is a detail that we're not given, right? We are not even given the faintest hint. So as far as our story is concerned, it doesn't matter. But isn't it fun to think about? John MacArthur thinks she was pregnant. He's got this logical reason for why he thinks she didn't come. But even he says in the end, it doesn't matter. Maybe she was drunk. Maybe she hated him. Do you have a reason? Maybe she didn't want to be paraded around in front of all those men. I even read that when it said for her to come in the crown, that was it. Just the crown. She didn't want, then you'll hear she was brave to stand up to him, and then you'll hear she was disrespectful as a wife. Okay, you'll get it all. But in the end, it doesn't matter. She said no. Christopher Ashe says, the world empire has great power, but it cannot bend the human will. I love that. All right, page 5. We're almost done. I keep saying that, Dan. The self-sabotaging plan. This one cracks me up. The wise men. Ian Duguid said, the ruling class of Persia is depicted not so much as the magnificent 7, but more like Ahasuerus and the 7 dwarfs. Verse 13, then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for it was the custom of the king to talk to them, the ones who knew the law and justice and were close to him, Karshena, Shethar, Admathna, Tarshish, Maries, Marasina, and Mimicum. Sorry, I should have practiced these. The 7 princes of Persia. So this is different than the 7 eunuchs a few verses ago. These are the actual princes of Persia who had access to the king's presence and sat in the first place in the kingdom. Okay, so again, we're given that nice detail of their names. It's just another way to show us this is true. There's details here. All right, Houston, we have a problem. Let's see what they think the problem is. According to law, what is to be done with Queen Vashti? Can't you just see them? And they're drunk. Because she did not do the declaration of King Ahasuerus delivered by the hand of the eunuchs. Then, in the presence of the king and the princes, Memucan said, Queen Vashti has committed iniquity not only against the king, but also against all of us, all of the princes and all the people who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the word about the queen, will get out to all women, causing them to despise their husbands in their eyes by saying, well, King Ahasuerus said for Queen Vashti to be brought into his presence, but she didn't come. This day, the ladies of Persia and Media who have heard of the word of the queen will speak in the same way to all the king's princes, and there will be plenty of spite and indignation. The most powerful men literally in the entire world, these 7 princes and the king, these 8 men are afraid of a revolt led by the women. So what are they going to do? We're going to make another law and tell everybody. If it seems good to the king, let a royal word go forth from him. All right, we've got a solution. We figured it out. And let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media so that it cannot be repealed. They had a law that if the king made a law, it couldn't be undone even by the king. Okay? So this law was that Vashti may no longer come into the presence of King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better. And the king's sentence, which he will make, will be heard throughout all the kingdom, for it is vast, right? 3 continents. And all women will give respect to their husbands, great and small, because we're going to make this law. All the women are going to straighten up. And this word was good in the eyes of the drunk king and the princes. And the king did according to the word of Memucan. So he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province according to its script, and to every people according to their tongue, that every man should be the ruler in his own house, and the one who speaks in the tongue of his own people. Now, what are some details here, just in this last little section? Real quick, what are some details? About this law?
The word was good.
They liked it?
They thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, they thought. I don't know. I've never been drunk, but the drunk people that have been around always think they're full of good ideas.
It has nothing to do with one person, the queen.
Yeah. Yeah.
The queen.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Or her, that particular.
It can't be undone. So when he wakes up in the morning and he's sober, he can't undo it. Vashti will never see the king again. They had a child together. I don't know what that meant. All 44 million people are notified at great effort. In a world with no social media and no Fox News, and they did a good job at making sure everyone knew about the king's disgrace. That isn't what they meant to do, but it's what happened, right? They got the word out. So the details of this intro chapter set the stage for the rest of our story, and I really am ending here. I promise. So what we need to walk away from this intro with is that the king was very powerful. He was very angry. He was often drunk. And he was rich beyond belief. He was powerful, angry, made decisions while he was drunk. Good thing he didn't have a car. And rich. My son Tommy pulling over. He was driving drunk. He relied on his advisors heavily. He relied on his advisors heavily. And then we saw the listing of those specific names. So all these details are important because they're gonna come up again, okay? So I'm just gonna leave it there, leave it at that. And next week for chapter 2, we'll finish our introduction. We'll talk about Esther a little bit, and meet Esther and Mordecai. So today we've met the bad guy, and next week we'll meet the hero, right? The hero of our story. So Susan, what is it that you want me to say? For this week, we'll go home and do your homework for week 1, okay? That'll be Esther 1. It's great. She digs into some things that I didn't, so that'll be wonderful. And when you get here next week, you'll just go straight to your small group and go over that homework. And then we'll come here and look at chapter 2. Does that make sense? It's a little different than how we did it last semester or last class, but we're gonna try it, see if we like it. All right, any questions? Anything? Everybody good?